This morning on the news show, we're going to be talking an awful lot, as we know, about the interview with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He's made an interview. Obviously, the 25% stake in Manchester United has been completed. 27.7 technically, and I think it rises to 28.6 potentially as well. So all good news there. We're going to get into the talking points and what he said. Plenty to talk about in terms of the Premier League, in terms of Old Trafford, in terms of the rivals. Dan Ashworth is mentioned as well. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit as well about Luke Shaw. Obviously, we heard the bad news yesterday that he could potentially miss the remainder of the season with a hamstring injury. Is it time maybe to cash in on Luke Shaw? And finally as well, more reports coming out linking Manchester United with Vinicius Jr. and a potential 200 million transfer fee being touted between Manchester United and Real Madrid. We'll talk about the silliness of that as well. But we're going to jump straight into it, guys, and talk about Sir Jim Ratcliffe. As always, please smash a like on the video if you haven't already done so. Do hit subscribe if you are new to the channel as well. You're all more than welcome, and get your comments into the comment section below. But of course, we're going to start with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and he's been speaking about, I suppose, the takeover of Manchester United and what it means. And there's obviously, I presume the majority of people have seen the interview and I've seen the snippets from it as well. So we're going to dive into some of the talking points, and of course let me know your comments as we go through them. But it's been all positive from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, it has to be said. He's been speaking very passionately about Manchester United. He's been speaking about bringing Manchester United back to the top and where they belong and so on and so forth. But we'll go down through some of the talking points. He was asked about the Premier League struggles, and he said it's been a complete misery in the last 11 years, and it's frustrating if you're a supporter during this period of time. Ups and downs. I remember, Ferguson. Before Ferguson, it wasn't great for some time. 11 years is a long period of time. Fundamentally, you want to see the club being where it should be. It's one of the biggest clubs in the world, and it should be playing the best football in the world. It hasn't been doing so for 10 or 11 years, so it's certainly related to the decision to invest. So he's talking obviously about wanting to bring Manchester United back, and getting things right on the field first and foremost is what's most important. Now, obviously, when we're talking about on the field issues and, challenges about playing on the pitch with Manchester United, we've got two very close rivals in terms of, I suppose, geographically, and then in terms of actually getting ahead and trying to win the league, and that's obviously Man City and Liverpool. He said they are one of the best teams on the planet. He said in relation to Manchester City, champions of England for 3 years running. We have a lot to learn from the noisy neighbour. I love that he actually says that statement again. Obviously, it was coined by Sir Alex Ferguson all those years ago, and our other neighbour, I don't think he even mentioned Liverpool by name there. They're the enemy at the end of the day, and there's nothing I would like better than to knock both of them off of their perch. Now, again, he is coining an old phrase that Sir Alex Ferguson came up with back in the day, knocking Liverpool off their fucking perch. So it all sounds brilliant. It really, really does. And he's coming out swinging, you would have to say. But he also then says, equally, we are the three great northern clubs, and we're all quite close to each other. They've been good. They've been in a good place for a while, both of them. There are things to be learned from both clubs. They've got sensible organisations, great people in the organisation, and a driven elite sort of environment that they work within. And as a consequence, the results have dropped out of the bottom. So I'm very respectful of them, but they're still the enemy. So look, I mean, it all sounds very positive from Jim Ratcliffe. Obviously getting the fans on board is very easy when you come out and talk about Liverpool and Man City being the enemy and we want to overtake them. But he's also smart enough to look at them and look at what they're doing and take a lot of the positives that they're doing and bring it and incorporate it into Manchester United. He was also asked then about returning to glory. He said, it's not a light switch. It's not one of these things that changes overnight. We have to be careful. We don't rush it in any way. You don't want to run to the wrong situation rather than walk to the correct solution. Run to the wrong solution rather than walk to the correct solution. I think that's a brilliant, brilliant way of putting it. And, we've been speaking an awful lot over the last few weeks and months. And I think even going back as far as Erik ten Hag getting the job at Manchester United, we've been speaking about the importance of fans being patient, because it's a process and it's going to take time. We speak specifically about Eric Ten Hag over the last 18 months, that it's going to take time for him, to try and change the playing squad around and implement a style of football and so on and so forth. And, it's taking time, and we're seeing that. He had a very good first season. Injuries this season, a dip in form. It's going to take time. And equally with, the structure being put in place behind the scenes with Eric, or with Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos and Manchester United, it's going to take time for the club to reap the rewards of these people coming in. And we've been mismanaged for so long at Manchester United that it's not going to be an overnight success. I think there was reports coming out that he's looking at a 5 transfer window plan to maybe turn Manchester United around and challenge them for the Premier League title. So you would be talking summer this year, January next year, summer next year, January the year after, and then the summer the year after. So you're talking about 2.5 years. You would be hoping in maybe this season, obviously not next season, the season after, and the season after that, you'll be looking at potentially going and challenging for Premier League titles. So it is going to take time, and we're going to have to be patient. He says the key challenge here is that longer term. We need to do things well and properly and thoroughly and not rush it. So it's not an overnight change. It's going to take 2 or 3 seasons. So you have to ask the fans for some patience. Yeah, absolutely. He was also asked about Eric Ten Hag, and he says, I'm not going to comment on Eric Ten Hag because I think it would be inappropriate to do that. But if you look at the 11 years that have gone since David Gill and Sir Alex Ferguson have stepped down, there have been a whole series of coaches, some of which were very good, and none of them were successful or survived for very long, and you can't blame all the coaches. The only conclusion you can draw is that the environment in which they were working didn't work, and Eric's been in that environment. I'm talking about the organisation, the people in the structure, and the atmosphere in the club. We have to do that bit, so I'm not really focused on the coach. I'm focused on getting that bit right, and that's not for me to judge that anyway. I'm not a football professional. So that Eric Ten Hag will find some comfort in that statement more than anything else, because what it does is that it kind of emphasises the fact that Jim Ratcliffe is looking to change it from the top down. So it's going to give Eric Ten Hag some time to work within the structure that Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe put in place. And I think that is the right thing to do. I think it shouldn't be the case that Eric Ten Hag should automatically be moved aside now that Jim Ratcliffe is coming in. I think he deserves time. I think he's a good enough coach and a good enough manager to deserve time to work under this umbrella of Ineos and the structure that they're putting in place. And I hope he does get that time. Signings, top of the list, he was asked then. He said, I think recruitment in the modern game is critical. Manchester United have clearly spent a lot of money, but they haven't done as well as some other clubs. So when I was talking about being best in class in all aspects of football, recruitment is clearly top of the list. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's quite clear to see, and it's quite obvious to anybody that the recruitment hasn't been up to standard in the last 10 years. It's ever since, obviously, Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill left together. And I think the importance of David Gill sometimes goes under the radar in how good he was at negotiating deals and getting players in and, negotiating with other clubs. I think it was vital. So it's something that is top of the priority, according to Jim Ratcliffe. Obviously, we see the likes of Omar Barada coming in. Dan Ashworth, who we'll talk about in a second, has been scouted out as well. And a number of different people coming in behind the scenes to get the structure right. And I think it's the right way to do it. He was also asked about the pursuit of Dan Ashworth and the asking price. He said, Dan Ashworth is clearly one of the top sporting directors in the world. I would have no doubt he is a very capable person. He is interested in Manchester United because it's the biggest challenge at the biggest club in the world. And he goes on to say this. He was asked also then about the 20 million price tag potentially to get Dan Ashworth out of Newcastle. And he said, a bit silly personally. He said about the reports for the 20 million. He said, I won't get dragged into it. What I do think is completely absurd is suggesting a man who is really good at his job sits in his garden for 1.5 years. So basically what he's saying there is that the 20 million for Dan Ashworth is going to be, slapped away by Manchester United. We're not going to pay that for him. But also we're not going to allow him to be on gardening leave for 1.5 years. So look, I think this is, I suppose, the obvious thing here is that Manchester United are going to be negotiating with Newcastle over the next days and weeks to try get that figure down and get Dan Ashworth in as quickly as possible. And I think this is probably the most important area at the moment. If you're going to be going into the summer transfer window spending 150, 200 million, having a man in place like Dan Ashworth, Omar Barada, whoever else it may be, then, that's vitally important, because you don't want to misspend another 150 million. So I think if it is maybe 10 million, I think it's probably a drop in the ocean in comparison to what we're going to spend in the summer. So let's get it right. He was also asked about Mason Greenwood's future. I don't want to, delve into this one too much, but he said he said we will make a decision. All I can do is talk about the principle of how we will approach decisions like that. Is he the right type of footballer? Is he a good person or not? It's quite clear we have to make a decision. There is no decision that has been made. He is on loan, obviously, but he's not the only one. We've got one or two footballers that we have to deal with, and we have to make a decision on. So that will be done. The process will be understand the facts, not the hype, and then try and come to a fair decision on the basis of values, which is basically he is a good guy or not. Look, and I think this is absolutely the right way to go about it. We've said countless times that if you're judging Mason Greenwood, coming back to Manchester United on ability alone, he walks back into the team. Absolutely he does. But you've got to look at more than just ability. You've got to look at morals. You've got to look at standards. You've got to look at, trying to lead the way in terms of, values, and I think that's more important than goals at the moment. We can always go and find players that will score us goals, but you can't necessarily completely rebuild a reputation that's been broken if you bring someone like Mason Greenwood back, and I think that's what he's saying there. But a decision will be made. He's also finally then talked about redeveloping Old Trafford, and obviously this is a big talking point at the moment in relation to the takeover. And it's on the table there for Jim Ratcliffe to potentially redevelop Old Trafford. He said what our plan is that we're going to work on the refurb, which is the obvious one and the one we know we can afford. But we will put together a small task force which probably we can talk about next week at arm's length, of people who have useful opinions and explore whether the bigger project makes sense. And I think this is what we've been hearing over the last day or two about the likes of Gary Neville potentially coming on board with Manchester United about redeveloping the area. Obviously he's got an awful lot of input into Manchester with businesses. He's got hotel football, he's got a university, all that kind of thing, and I think it's a good idea bringing him on board. He said what I've seen of the stadium so far is there is a really good case to refurbish Old Trafford, probably about 1 billion in cost. You finish up with a great stadium. It's probably 80 or 90,000 seater, but it's not perfect because you're modifying a stadium that is slap bang up against a railway line and that type of stuff. So it's not an ideal world. But you finish up with a very good answer. Manchester United need a stadium befitting one of the biggest clubs in the world at the moment. And he was speaking about this as well, and he was talking about, we've obviously heard over the last few months the Wembley of the North is what's been touted, and obviously going to government and looking for maybe some funding there about using Old Trafford as, a Wembley, where you can host events and so on and so forth, and, revitalise the area in Manchester and the North in general. So it all sounds good. Again, look, I've made my points clear on, should it be Old Trafford refurbished or should we go to a new stadium right next to it? I don't really mind, to be quite honest with you. As long as it remains Old Trafford and it remains in the vicinity of Old Trafford, I'm okay with it. And whatever is more befitting to the club and what benefits us most. It has to be said. So look, all really, really good. Go and watch the interview, guys. It's on the BBC iPlayer. It's some really good talking points there, it has to be said. And let me know all your comments and thoughts on what he's been saying in the comment section below, because it's really, really positive. We're going to move on a little bit and talk about Luke Shaw for a moment. Anybody who's watching on YouTube can see that the headline is should Manchester United sell Luke Shaw? Obviously, we've heard yesterday that, some bad news coming out. Luke Shaw sustained a muscle injury and will be out for an extended period. A lot of reports are suggesting it's going to be for the remainder of the season. Further assessment is still needed to determine the severity, but we expect him to be absent for a few months. It's really, really not good in relation to Luke Shaw. We've seen how important he is to Manchester United over the last few weeks since he's come back from his initial injury. And I think there's a relevant case there for Luke Shaw there's a relevant case for Manchester United to be looking at alternative options for left back. If we look at Luke Shaw in the Premier League since he signed for Manchester United, he has never played more than 32 games in one season. If we look at his first season, 16, then he had 5, obviously after that bad leg break. He comes back then the following 2 seasons, 16, 17 and 17, 18. He plays 11 games each season. He then goes through 3 seasons, 29 games, 24 games, 32 games, then 20 games, then 31 games, and now 12. And he looks to be out for the remainder of the season. So he has had his injury issues. Look, there's no doubt that Luke Shaw is an absolutely fantastic footballer and one that Manchester United would hope could stay injury-free, and I think he would be absolutely the number one left-back. But do we have to go into the market? That's the issue here. I think Manchester United should be looking in the transfer market for potential, I won't say replacements of Luke Shaw, but I think over the next season or two, we have to be looking at potentially bringing in a brand new left back. I really do. I think if Luke Shaw continues to get these injuries, obviously that will accelerate the process. But I think first and foremost, Luke Shaw has been there an awful long time. I think, what is he? He's 26 at the moment. How he's only 26 seems crazy considering he's been at the club for so long. I think it's not a bad idea to be looking at alternative options at left back. I really don't. If Luke Shaw is going to continue to pick up these types of injuries, then, we talk about Manchester United being a good selling club. If Luke Shaw is continuing to pick up injuries, it tends to not get better the older you get. So do we cash in now and get maybe some good money in for him? And I think that's the type of questions Manchester United need to start asking themselves when it comes to the transfer market and selling players specifically. How is his market value? And are we going to get any more for him in 2 or 3 years down the line? Is the juice worth the squeeze, as they say? Put it all together. Injuries, price tag. Should we cash in now? Should we keep him for a year or two and then sell him on for a lower price? I'm not saying sell Luke Shaw in the summer. Absolutely not. I think he should stay at Manchester United. But if we bring in another left-back to really, really challenge him, I don't think Malacia is going to be the guy to challenge him long-term. I think Malacia is probably more of a backup. But if you bring in another left-back that can challenge Luke Shaw on a consistent basis, that has real potential to take that spot number one, then I think that can only be a positive. And if Luke Shaw continues to get injuries, then that's his problem. I do think over the next couple of seasons, we need to look at really replacing, I won't say really replacing Luke Shaw, but bringing in a left back that can really challenge him and put some pressure on him. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Would you sell Luke Shaw in the summer, or would you keep him? I would probably keep him for another season. I think, let's see how he gets on with this injury and how he comes back from it. If he continues to get injuries, after he returns from this one and maybe into next season, then absolutely I would be looking at to get rid of him at the end of next year. But for now, I'd be keeping him in the summer transfer window. Michael says, if we sell Luke Shaw, who replaces him at left back? Well, that's for the likes of Dan Ashworth and Omar Barada to go out and scout players and so on and so forth. But I don't think it's going to get to that at the moment. Finally, guys, I want to talk a little bit about this. Manchester United are prepared to offer 200 million to land Vinicius Jr. What a load of absolute cobwobble, it has to be said. Manchester United could be about to smash their own British transfer record with an outlandish offer for Real Madrid's Vinicius Jr. News broke earlier this week that Real Madrid have reached an agreement with Kylian Mbappe to arrive in the summer window. Despite technically being a free transfer, the BBC report that he is set to sign a 5-year deal with Real, earning €15 million a season, plus €150 million signing on bonus to be paid over 5 years. And he will keep a percentage of his image rights. Therefore, Los Blancos will probably need to raise cash for the deal and also have the problem of what to do with the talented Brazilian Vinicius Jr., who occupies the same terrain on the pitch as a left-sided attacker. It has been reported numerous times in Spain that Madrid could seek to sell the Brazilian international to generate income and also free up space in their squad. Defensa Central says now assert that United could do the Spanish league leaders the biggest of favours. I'm just going to stop it right there. Manchester United will not be spending 200 million on Vinicius Jr. Absolutely no way. We've been talking about, going into the transfer market for the first time in a long time being smart with a structure, with a football director, a CEO, all these kind of things. And, I think going and spending, Manchester United are probably going to be lucky to have 200 million to spend in the summer. Now, if we blow that on one player, it's absolute nonsense. It's really absolute nonsense. I can't see Manchester United going in for a Vinicius Jr. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'll continue to say it. Manchester United need to get the balance right between quality and quantity. We need 4 or 5 players to come in the summer transfer window. No question. You have to get quality and quantity right. If you get, quality, that goes up here and you spend 200 million on Vinicius Jr. Quantity is gone because you can't spend any money on anybody else. You got to get that balance right. You got to find good players for decent price tags and get him in to perform well for Manchester United. And I think that's what we will do going forward. But let me know what you think in the comment section below, guys, on all of the talking points that we've been mentioning this morning. Some really interesting stuff there coming out from Jim Ratcliffe as well. Luke Shaw, let me know would you keep him or sell him. Smash a like on the video if you haven't already done so. Please do hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel as well. On the road to 8,000 subscribers, which is brilliant. Appreciate all the support. I'll be back tonight from 8 o'clock as always. For the news show, so make sure you're joining for that as well. We'll go in depth in all the talking points today as well. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in a bit. Take it easy.